improve it?
Well, once again, that's an issue that we can tackle to some extent. I believe that infusing competition into the marketplace would be incredibly helpful. One of the devastations of Obamacare is you made the federal government an even larger payer of health care, which means that you reduce the competition, and that only leads to a few folks having the control of our health care market. One would, of course, be insurance companies. One of my dear friends, whose wife has a very serious lung issue, had a meeting this past Tuesday that the medicine she needs is $30,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
A month. And he and I grew up together. We've been friends since I was about 12 years old. They came to my house last Tuesday and had a meeting with the nurses trying to get the insurance companies to approve it. They turned them down the first time because they thought it was experimental. And unfortunately, there's only one drug on the market. There's good news and bad news to that side of the conversation, by the way. The bad news, frankly, is it's $30,000 a month. Good news is that most of the medicines that we need today, about 90% of the drugs that we use are now on generic brands and no longer the label brand, which means for most of the morbidities that most Americans are facing, whether it's cholesterol issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, those three primarily represent the morbidities that we hear a lot about. They're about $5 for a 30-day supply. As we move towards personalization in healthcare, and that personalized healthcare is going to spike the prices for a period of time, and then when it comes off of the patent protection, they go down precipitously. We've saved millions of lives because of our approach towards healthcare. I would say reintroducing competition would be incredibly helpful. There's something else called PBMs. They are pharmaceutical benefit managers who control the price of a lot of the drugs in our country. And so they are a middleman, so to speak, or the middle person who's in trouble because they keep spiking the prices by, could be as little as 30%, sometimes even higher, and that significant impact is being carried on the backs of patients who need that medicine desperately. So having a chance for us to reintroduce competition on the Finance Committee, we oversee lots of challenges that we see in healthcare and drug prices. Our goal has been to eliminate those PBMs. At least my goal is to reduce their impact and not eliminate them. Two really important things that we can do long term that will reduce the price of it. The final thing that we can do that will be helpful long term is that as we use more innovation in healthcare, what we're able to do is to spot those anomalies through technology. Those anomalies allows us to get to cures and therapies faster than we've ever seen in the history of our country. That's really good news for folks today. There are about 7,000 rare blood diseases that have no treatment and no therapies. And so using technology as a way to figure out the anomalies, people's patients' reaction or negative reaction to medicine allows us to, through the anomalies found in technology, reduce it significantly and get to a place where we can reduce the price long term. But that's going to be a struggle and a fight for the next decade at the very least. Yes, sir.
What did you think of the hostage deal that came about this morning?
Yeah, two things. I said this back when President Obama was the president of our country, that paying $400 million to release hostages would only increase the price on every single American head abroad. $6 billion is only going to make it infinitely worse in the future for Americans traveling, particularly in harm's way. I think we all celebrate the return of Americans without any question, but paying a ransom is terrible policy and will only lead to more Americans being put in jeopardy. I can't think of a harsher sentence for future Americans as they travel abroad than to see President Biden pay a $6 billion ransom. It's going to be challenging.
Didn't they release, the U.S. also released 5
Yes. Yes, yeah, they're getting some of their guys back, which is problematic as well because they were incarcerated and tried and found guilty. So it's not, there's not a question mark there about the people that were being returned.
And 2 are remaining in the United States
Well,
at their request.
Yes. Well, like a look across water. Yes. So this is the kind of stuff that really should frustrate all of us as Americans. Understand and appreciate, number one, the high price put on our heads by our government isn't problematic. It is a crisis for those traveling, particularly through some of the more challenging parts of the world. Number two, it should help us reinforce the fact that leadership matters. I saw this once before under Obama. We're seeing it again under Biden, both with disastrous outcomes for America long term. So, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Take it away.
All right, here's something you should be able to be under control if you become president. What do you think of the border and what's going on now and what you're going to do?
You know what I'll do? I'll start where I should have started. I was really coming in to walk around and chat for a little while, and so I saw you guys sitting here looking like y'all ready for some Q&A. So I'm going to reverse myself on that. What I typically do when I have a town hall, this is really a town hall at this point, not a meet and greet. So I typically walk in the room and say, "Hey, how are y'all doing?" And then y'all say, "Hi." That's going to my spiel, right? My spiel basically starts with the fact that I'm so proud to be an American. I don't think there's another country on the planet where my story is possible. All things are possible as Americans. We have been blessed with the greatest citizenship on all of God's green earth. We have won the lottery of citizenship. Every single one of us should be extremely proud to be the beneficiaries of such a high price paid throughout all of our history so that we can have this conversation today. That's why I know that America can do for anyone what she's done for me. I'm focusing on restoring hope, creating opportunities, and protecting the America we all love. For me, protecting America includes building the southern wall and closing the southern border. Once we close the southern border, we should use the available military technology to surveil our southern border to stop the Chinese precursors that are sent to Mexico, manufactured in a Mexican lab, and then Mexican drug cartels bring that final product called illegal fentanyl across our southern border. We have the technology today to stop the deaths of 70,000 Americans in just 12 months. Closing the southern border is one of the most important national security issues that we are failing to address right now. This country spends $7 trillion. T as in Tom. $7 trillion. And this president is selling off the parts to finish the southern wall. And he refuses. Yes, sir. I wrote a letter 5 weeks ago about the fact that he is selling for pennies on the dollar the parts, the construction material to finish the wall.
Can you stop him?
We cannot. Cannot. Dereliction of duty. But we can fire him. First thing we do, ma'am, is finish that wall. Second thing we do is use the military technology to surveil the wall. Not only is it fentanyl coming across our southern borders, we're also seeing the devastation of the greatest human trafficking ring come right across our southern borders. It's unbelievable what we're seeing done to our country. I've said it for a long time that if you don't control your back door, it's probably not your house.
Exactly. Yep.
If you don't control your southern border, it won't be your country for long. And I haven't even talked about the 6 million plus illegal immigrants that crossed our border before the end of Title 42. Title 42, which was something instituted under the former president for COVID, probably reduced the number of illegal crossings maybe by 50%. President Biden allowed that to go away. As your next president, I would reinstate Title 42, not for a COVID emergency. COVID's gone. Been gone for a long time. But for the fentanyl healthcare crisis, we could reinstate that, reduce our number of illegal crossings, plus there were over 200 people on our security national watch list that we caught at our southern borders. How many did we not catch?
Too many.
Way too many, sir. And so we have 3 things I would do in addition to finishing the wall, not talking about it, but doing it, using technology. 3 other things. Number 1, you have to get back to the remain in Mexico policy. We have to slow down precipitously the number of illegal immigrants coming to our border. And then they need to ask for asylum to the country closest to their country and not come to our country. And the reason why is that once they get to our country, their court date, if they end up in New York City, as many do, their court date is not until 2033. 10 years. I'm sure that some of you, well, I don't believe they're showing up. I don't believe they're going to show up. So we have to stop them from having a court date by make them ask for asylum where they are. And then we have to target the Mexican cartels. Now, I have legislation that I've sponsored as a senator that has passed through the committee that sanctions their assets and freezes their accounts. That's like taking the blood out of their system. These folks are worth over $20 billion. So we have an opportunity to use our sanctions regime to stop the flow of fentanyl as well. And then we would target them with or without the help of the Mexican government. They must cease to exist on our side.
How do we stop them from voting?
Well, that's a constitutional question that we should make sure that every single jurisdiction follows the Constitution. I believe that this is a debate. Someone would say this is debatable. I believe that our founding fathers intended only for citizens to vote. And that's what I call common sense. New York and California, they lost their common sense a long time ago.
You join a club, a voting member of a club. Somebody comes to visit your meeting.
Yes,
They don't get an opportunity to vote.
absolutely.
Citizens should vote, not legal residents.
Totally agree.
Senator,
Yeah.
so that we've got time to mingle. We're going to take maybe 2 more questions.
Okay.
Oh, mine. I feel like I'm agreed.
First of all, happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am. Good job.
Sorry.
I'll come and sit up with my
Yeah, I appreciate that. Put you as president inside.
That sounds.
All right. Insert yourself in the labor talks. Whether would you insert yourself in the banks or in any of it? Oh, you got to stand up now.
So these good folks back here can see me too.
Okay, there you go.
I mean, I'm a big boy, but I'm sitting down. I'm more quiet as well. And so there's 2 questions she asked. Number 1, she said, would I, as President of the United States, insert myself into this labor dispute? Number 2,
The banks.
The banks.
The banks fail, which,
Yeah.
you know, again.
right. So let me answer the first question. I think Ronald Reagan gave us a great example when federal employees decided they were going to strike. He said, you strike, you're fired. Simple concept to me. To the extent that we could use that once again, absolutely. The second thing I would do, though, is very important. This is probably not a well-known fact. The first thing, part of the challenge that we have today with President Biden is, and I don't mean this to be disingenuous, I mean this to be sincere. I'm not sure if the words are bought and paid for, but it's certainly he has been leased by the unions. And I say that because the first bill he passed Y'all remember the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package?
Yeah.
That only had 1% for COVID vaccines? It had $86 billion, I believe, for union pensions. Because they keep making these deals. And as a result of the deal, they promise too much, deliver too little, and the taxpayers pick up the tab. I'll never forget being in a finance committee meeting about 3 or 4 years ago, thereabout, and a widow walked into the meeting. She was one of the witnesses to testify. And she testified that the union that her husband enjoyed and received $3,000 or $4,000 a month benefit from in his retirement, he passed away. So that was her primary source of income. Well, when you overpromise and underdeliver, ultimately they cut her pension. Not by 1,000, not by 2, but literally, basically with belly up, about $1,000 a month. The federal government has a backstop for some of that, but the backstop is about $12,000 a year or $1,000 a month. When they overpromise, taxpayers should not be on the hook. They end up on the hook when the president negotiates and provides your dollars to their pensions, even though you didn't work for them. So that's the first thing we should do as President of the United States, is to stop reshoring pension plans that are failing in the private sector, because the deal makers make unrealistic promises. The other things that are really important in that deal is that they want more money working fewer hours. They want more benefits working fewer days. In America, also known as America, that doesn't make sense. That's not common sense. You cannot overpromise, underdeliver, and put you and I on the hook for that. I would stop that as president. As it relates to bank failures, I think our banking system is the marvel of the world. We have hot spots called Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, and a couple of others that have struggled significantly. Silicon Valley Bank is a classic example of what not to do. They went from a $50 billion bank to a over $200 billion bank in about 4 years. They were an anomaly. They weren't a regional bank, though. They were really a commercial bank, disguised as a regional bank. 94% of their deposits were uninsured. The average regional bank has about 60 to 70% of their deposits insured by the FDIC. And so when these banks went belly up, we, the taxpayers, sooner or later pay the bill of over $20 billion. The legislation that I wrote and passed through the bank, I'm the senior member of on the Republican side for the banking committee. We covered the entire financial footprint for our country. I wrote legislation that would claw back incentive bonuses and compensation from the executives, the top 4 executives, when their bank goes belly up and they give themselves bonuses a day or two, really within 18 months of their banks going belly up. So I would take the taxpayers off the hook as much as possible and then punish the very people who are responsible for those terrible decisions. And then we have to also accelerate the FDIC and the Federal Reserve getting to the table faster, and then cutting a deal to sell that institution before that went into the weekend. March the 9th or 10th is when it happened. If they waited until Sunday to make a deal, had they made that deal on Friday, you would have actually had banks and private equity firms willing to purchase that. They waited so long that way the taxpayers ended up absorbing too much of the cost. Yes, sir.
You're pro-life.
Yes, sir.
When does it begin?
Conception.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next question.
Quick comment. Thanks for running such a positive campaign. I think you're setting a standard that I'm proud of.
Thank you so much.
I had lunch with 7 or 8 of my high school classmates this last Saturday, and some liberal Democrats, some conservative Republicans. The one thing we agreed on, and with all due respect, and the present company not included, what we agreed on was that we believe politicians care more about keeping their jobs than they do about the people that they represent.
That's
And we agreed that there are some things that we can do about it. One, I think term limits is an excellent idea. Second of all, I think that we have to get control of gerrymandering because I think we have subverted the equity of our vote based on the way we have contorted congressional districts.
Yes.
So, what do you think about gerrymandering? What do you think about term limits? And what do you think we can do to get our government to be more effective than it is today?
Yeah, so the short answer on gerrymandering is it's an issue where the Supreme Court has ruled recently in Alabama, recently in North Carolina, maybe not North Carolina, Supreme Court. There's a court ruling that they're having to redraw their districts because of the gerrymandering. And today, Alabama, they've tried twice in Alabama to turn that over, and it's not working. Gerrymandering on political purposes seems to be constitutional. Good, bad, or indifferent, it stands the test of time. On race, no. On red and blue, yes. On term limits, I think common sense should lead every single member who's elected to go home at a certain time. I've committed myself to no more than 2 full terms. So win, lose, or draw, I've told the good people in South Carolina, who I've loved dearly, and it's been a blessing in my life to serve them, I'm going to improve my reputation by leaving office. I had a great reputation before I came into politics. I still have a very good reputation now. I'm going to leave quickly. I'm not president of the United States. I'm not running for re-election, period. I think getting term limits done throughout government, a lot of people talk the game, but then they walk back when it's time for them to say, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's why
The legislature.
That's what I'm getting at. I'm a co-sponsor of legislation after legislation after legislation to limit terms in Congress. I did it in the House. I did it in the State House. I was an entrepreneur beforehand. I'm going to go back into business, and the future was nice before I left.
I think you'll do it.
It'll be okay. I think it'll be okay. I took a pay cut to do this, so this is. I tell you though, only less than 2,000 Americans have had the privilege of serving in the United States Senate. And I thank God. I really do. I thank the Lord. He's blessed me with the health, the energy, and curiosity to serve the people that I love. That gave me a second chance. I didn't tell my stories I usually do. I was a kid born in a single-parent household, mired in poverty, struggling early in school because I just didn't think that it was going to work for me. And my mentor and my mom, another believed that prayer was the key and faith would unlock every single door necessary. My mentor said, look in the mirror, blame yourself for where you're not, and take responsibility. We are creating a culture of grievance where everybody's a victim. And it frustrates me so much to see the progress that we've made as a nation and to see so many people talking as if we are living in the 1960s or the 1860s. America is the country to be celebrated. I find it frustrating that this drug of victimhood and the narcotic of despair is spreading like a cancer in our nation, and it's avoidable. Finally, I'll say on this important question. We are not a nation in decline. We are a nation in retreat. Bad leadership has us running away from our values, running away from church attendance, running away from giving every parent school choice, running away from things. We saw this before. This is not a new movie. This is a sequel. The first one came out in the 1970s under Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan came in, and it was a new morning in America. We can do it again. We're just in a Biden retreat. New leadership turns us around. I want to be that leader. We can turn it around like that. Yes, sir.
You gave us part of your biography. Could you give me the rest of it in one paragraph?
No, sir.
Family, members, and things like that.
Yes.
Mom, grandma, and all that stuff.
Yes, I can't give you all that in the paragraph. I can tell you, I can tell you the short story, which is that my grandfather was born in 1921 in Sally, South Carolina, in a very segregated South Carolina where...
I'm from North Carolina, so I
You know the deal, okay. And so you remember those days when a black man had to walk on the sidewalk, don't look anybody in the eye, and just keep on moving, or you get in trouble or physically get beat. And so my grandfather was forced out of school in the 3rd grade. And when my parents divorced, we moved into his house. He's in his 40s. And he said to me, looked me straight in my eyes. I'm looking you in the eyes like you were me and I'm my grandfather. And this is a man that had every reason to be bitter in life. He said, Timmy, everybody called me Timmy back in the day. All still thinks I'm Timmy. Anyways, he said, son, you can be bitter or you can get better. But you can't be both. That tells you all you need to know about my grandfather. That he had a choice between being bitter or getting better. And he taught me that faith in God, faith in yourself, and faith in what America would be is reason enough to work hard. My mother, who raised me in a single-parent household, she worked 16-hour days as a nurse's aide, changing bedpans and enrolling patients for just a little bit over minimum wage. And she taught me, you can be a victim or you can be victorious. She chose victorious. If you've seen any of my ads on TV, one of the reasons why I say if you're able-bodied in America, you work, is when my mother worked 16-hour days, putting food on the table and keeping the lights on. She taught me by example. We do not make excuses for people who will not do what they can do.
Amen.
Period. The story is slightly different than their story. I had to figure it out the hard way. I got 2 brothers. I got an ugly brother and a good-looking brother. My ugly brother, he served 26 years in the Air Force. Retired as a colonel, went to the Air Force Academy. My good-looking brother served 32 years in the Army and retired as a command sergeant major after 32 years. Here's what I've learned from their examples as well. I've learned that all things are possible, but if you don't believe it, it probably won't be for you. One last question, sir.
That sounds like the gospel song.
Yes, sir. Last question.
Can I get you to sign a couple books?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Yes, sir.
The biggest thing I see as a threat to our country right now is our debt.
Yes.
It's I mean, in the last 15, 20 years, it's exponentially grown. And yet and both parties are guilty of kicking the can down the road. What is your solution to get a budget like regular people have and make the government more accountable without hurting everybody?
Yes, so 2 things I'd say to that. Number 1, last time we actually cut spending in Washington, I voted for it. It's 2011 with the BCA, the Budget Control Act, 2011. We actually cut spending net $40 billion. Not a ton, but it was the first time we've seen a reversal in spending in 30 plus years. As President of the United States, I would first advocate for a balanced budget amendment. I have sponsored some over the last 10 years. It's kind of like term limits. Everybody talks about it, but nobody wants to pass it. I would make that one of my priorities as President of the United States. The second thing I would do is I would grow our economy. One of the challenges that we have today is that we need to grow our economy in the private sector where jobs are created. Politicians don't create jobs. Never have, and never will. We can create soil conditions that are good for job creators. High interest rates are not. Low interest rates are. High taxes are not. Low taxes are. Immediate expensing and accelerated depreciation allows for more manufacturers to come home to America. We've lost 100,000 manufacturing locations, 100,000 factories in the last 25 years. If we had the tax code, we could bring those jobs back home and reshore thousands upon thousands of jobs in America. Couple that with then taking our spending back to pre-pandemic levels. We are no longer in a healthcare crisis. Why are we still spending as if we are in a healthcare crisis? We should go back to pre-pandemic levels of spending. 2019, it would save, I'm talking about non-defense discretionary spending. It would save us $500 billion. But over a 10-year window, because of the reduction in spending on one side versus the trajectory of spending from where we are now forward, I think it would save us closer to $2 trillion. And so those three things, balanced budget amendment, tack on the pre-pandemic level, and then cut taxes, cut interest rates by controlling inflation, we would have a country and a spending plan we could be proud of. Today, under Joe Biden, we expect to spend 40% more than we take in. I voted no, because common sense says you don't spend what you don't have, buying what you cannot afford, impressing a world completely unimpressed by our spending.
Senator, probably leave it there so you get a chance to hide.
Okay, all right. Thank y'all. I'll make my way around as I can.